coffee, especially coffee roasters. I've been working in coffee for coming up 8 years now, and we've had our own company for 4 of them. This is my 5th year in competition. And when I got my first job, when I arrived to Wellington, the roaster at the time was training up along with his partner, and I got stuck on a few run-throughs, and I learned the most I've ever learned in coffee within such a short amount of time just from watching him and asking him questions. If I was an animal, I would hands down be a honey badger. Just like officially the most badass animal in the animal kingdom. If you haven't seen them, YouTube honey badger, you won't forget it.
Let's welcome back our judges to WBC finalist number 2, Barista Champion of New Zealand, Nick Clark!
Yeah, you too. Thanks, man. Cheers.
So, Nick, when you're ready, if you raise your hand, that will start your timer. A huge congratulations on making finals. The very best of luck.
Thank you. All right. You guys all good to go? Good? Okay, cool. Time. So today, I really want to show you guys a good time. Now, I've brought a coffee with me, which has completely blown me away. The first time we met was in a blind cupping. And as soon as I walked in, I could literally smell this guy from across the other side of the room. It was just singing to me. Now, today, I'm gonna need a little bit of help from you guys. Nothing too major. It's all focused around this tasting table we have in front of us. I'm gonna ask you to move a few things around and pick a few things up. And when I do, just get right in there, all right? Don't be shy. And if anything does go wrong, I'll be here to help, so feel safe. Sound good? Cool. Now, this coffee is called the French Mission Sun-Dried. And it's of the French Mission Bourbon varietal. It's grown in Kenya, in the Thika region. Now for this particular lot, all the trees are grown in a traditional spacing method, which is slightly wider than today's commercial spacing. Now the reason for this is simple. It encourages the trees to go taller and wider, and by doing that, we get a more bolder and better quality fruit. Now speaking of the fruit, all the cherries are selectively hand-picked when ripe. They're then hand-sorted and processed as a sun-dried natural. Now that sun-dried natural processing method, that's key to what we're going to be doing later on. So if you could kind of grab that, just pop it up here, and just hold that thought. Is that cool? Nice one. Now from here, what I'd really like to do with you guys is kickstart our tasting off with espresso. The main reason being our palates are nice and fresh, so they're not going to be tainted or influenced by any other flavors. And I really feel that just by tasting the French Mission Sun-Dried just as is, we're all going to get a really good idea of where we're going today. And to be honest, it makes my job a bit easier to communicate what's going on. So we're going to do that. Now you'll notice you have 3 little rings on your bottom right-hand side. If I could ask you to pick the first one up, just have a look in your own time, and when you're ready, place it in the circle that says sweet, and I'll be right back. Just going to purge the throat of my grinder.
Okay, let's unpack a little bit of what Nick's told us so far. He's talked about the French Mission variety. The French, of course, brought coffee to East Africa, the Kenya region he's talking about, from the island of Bourbon, which is in the Indian Ocean, in the late 19th century. So there's a little bit of history packed in there.
For sure, and I don't know about you, I don't know how it is in the US, but certainly in Europe we don't see so many natural Kenyans. The natural Kenyans we do see aren't very good. I got to taste Nick's shot yesterday during his practice session. It's phenomenal.
Now, this is the sweet element we're going to find in our espresso. What I'd like you to look for is a bright and juicy nectarine. I'll give you a moment to write that down.
I'm really interested about how many naturals have turned up to these finals. It always used to be washed coffees.
That's right.
But we're seeing so many more naturals come through, and I think that that's a development in the natural process of people having more control and being able to repeat things.
Right, and of course a natural is a coffee that's been sun-dried in its own fruit.
Now if I could ask you ladies to pick up the second little wheel, have a little look, and then when you're ready, place it in the circle above sweetness that says acidic.
So a natural is...
Now this is the acidity we're going to find in our espresso. With this, what I want you to look for is a raspberry acidity. Rides off the back of the sweetness. And the last but not least, my favorite part, if you could pick the last ring up and place it in the circle that says bitterness. Now it's a bit odd that bitterness would be my favorite, but it's got a huge texture at the back of the drink. What I want you to look for is a dry, husky cocoa nib. Hits us entirely at the end and leaves us with a dry, but at the same time refreshing linger. Now what we have in front of us is a breakdown of our three main components we're about to taste. They all come together to balance. And that word balance, that's the other key to what we're doing today. So again, if you could pop it up here next to the sun-dried natural processing method, we're going to play with them in a moment. Now the reason why I've given you this visual little puzzle, this is because this is an exercise I do with my customers back at home. I try to get them to help build the drink with me. It really helps me to communicate better what's going on to them as a barista, and at the same time it helps them to better understand what they're about to drink. Now, what I'd like you to do when I serve you the espresso is to evaluate the creamer as soon as possible, stir 3 times, and then get right in there with your spoon. 90-degree angle, and stir for a minimum of 5 seconds. I'm going to let you know when to stop. Okay? Cool. Now, as soon as I bring these over, what I'd like you to do now, before I bring them over, if you could raise your right hand in the air with your index finger, just like this. Now, if you could pop it on this white bit, and then bring it over that black circle. That's the texture of the espresso we're about to taste. Real silky with a slight grit.
Interesting that Nick's talking about texture of the espresso. I think this is something that we see more of in presentations.
Right. And that's amazing, getting a multi-sensory experience, a sort of tactile feel on the finger to illustrate the tactile nature of the coffee. That's a big move.
That sweet juicy nectarine, that raspberry acidity, and that nice dry cocoa on the finish. Enjoy, guys. I'll be right back.
Okay, he's talked about raspberry. Talked about raspberry and this husky kind of characteristic. These are connected to this sun-dried natural process that we're talking about. It's unusual in Kenya because it's so risky. It can produce really off flavors of yogurt or even onion, and so for that reason, it's not been historically so popular. But you're saying that there's been a number of naturals.
There's sure a number of Ethiopian naturals coming through. In fact, our next competitor has been using an Ethiopian natural, where it's a little bit more common, but
sure,
really interesting.
Yeah.
Can I get my geek on?
Yes,
this is the first time that we've had an all-female sensory judges panel.
How about that?
That's brilliant. I mean, that's amazing. If these guys are good enough, they should be in there, and it's really good to see. But it's also kind of saddened by it's an all-male final again.
Absolutely. Well, the sensory scientists tell me that women tend to have stronger flavor acuity than men do. So that's probably that. I don't know whether that's a challenge or a benefit for him. I think this idea of his customer, who in this case are judges, interacting with him on this there's puzzles and things to feel and things to look at, colors. I think that's a really smart thing. He's engaging their minds as well as their palates.
What I'd like you guys to look for is a sweet orange rind. Now this translates to the back of the drink to be an orange bitterness as well, and then a smooth, creamy butterscotch. And that bit there really carries the body through in the cappuccino. Now, what gets me really excited, but at the same time freaks me out, is how much control we as roasters and baristas have over the profile we find in a cup. Here we go. In a way, it's almost our job to act as an ambassador for a coffee. As soon as we receive it from a green bean, all the way through to the finished product we find in the cup. It's up to us to maximize that sweetness, that optimum acidity, and that bitterness coming through. Now, for this particular coffee, we decided to roast it just to the lighter side of medium, and I'm going to tell you why in just a moment. I'll leave you with that. I've also got these here for your teaspoons.
Okay, a couple things that he mentioned there. One was this idea of coffee stewardship. I think that's an important thing. He's demonstrating his commitment to the coffee and his sense of responsibility for it. He also has mentioned the word bitterness a couple times. That's kind of a risky move because, bitterness is something that most coffee professionals sort of shirk away from. But of course, it's an intrinsic part of the coffee experience.
It's an intrinsic part of the score sheet too, isn't it? There is still bitterness on that score sheet that you're going to be assessing. So, And I think, we kind of see bitterness as a real big negative, but actually, we think about dark chocolate notes that we find in coffees, that could be perceived as
Orange
a bitterness.
peel, he mentioned, yeah.
Exactly.
And which, orange peel, dark chocolate, and milk go really, really well together. So there's it's no accident that he mentioned that during his cappuccino course.
Like if I'm finding some baker's chocolate in my cappuccino, I'm going to be really happy. So these are all great notes to be in there, and we shouldn't perhaps see this bitterness as such a scary word.
Right.
But we do, and the judges can sometimes pick up on that. So it is a little risky.
And he's taken it head on. I think that's the courage he's shown here, is that he's taken this flavor characteristic and he's kind of owning it. And I think the judges, if he delivers on what he's saying in the cup, I think the judges will really, really embrace that along with him.
For sure.
Another
the biggest thing with Nick as well, though, he just looks so calm. Everything's, are you good? Are you okay?
Exactly.
He's so casual.
Yeah, that's
he's
right.
on the World Barista Championship final, and it's
Right.
like he's on a walk.
Now, just the same as before, we've got that sweet orange rind to start with, and that translates through to the bitterness at the end as well. And then a smooth, creamy butterscotch. You'll find that carrying the body through. Now, the French Mission Sun-Dried is naturally quite a sweet coffee, so we really wanted to focus on chasing out the acidity, hence that lighter roast profile. There we go.
It's a silent.
Now, you start to couple this with a dose of 21 grams and a slightly faster extraction to encourage that bitterness to come through. We start to build our little puzzle of flavour we have here, and we also start to achieve balance in the cup.
Tension's huge, isn't it?
There we are. You're welcome. Enjoy.
Beautiful job.
Let's get happy, let's get clapping for Cappuccino!
Okay, so he's done with his cappuccino course. Of course, one thing to keep in mind, the last competitor mentioned this, is the milk quality. Of course, New Zealand and Australia both are known for having really, really high milk quality, and I think that's probably an advantage here for this competitor. Real sweet, really composed milk.
I have had some of the most amazing cappuccinos since I've been here in Melbourne. It has been phenomenal. It's almost turned me into enjoying them again because the milk is just so thick and gooey and delicious.
Yeah, my wife, who's a cappuccino drinker, insists that she thinks the coffee's better down here, and I keep telling her I think it's at least partially the milk.
No, for sure. They're very blessed, and particularly in New Zealand, it's such big greenery and such good rain as well. It's really good. I was lucky enough in November this year to actually go to Nick's shop in Wellington.
Sorry to interrupt, I'll give you a moment soon. Now, the French Mission Sun-Dried is farmed in a plantation called the Chennai Estate, and that's owned by a family called the Harrys. Now, these guys have owned this plantation, and they've been doing their thing now for over 100 years, which is pretty amazing. Now, what's really interesting about this coffee is that it's not usually processed as a sun-dried natural. It's usually processed as washed coffee, naturally giving us a different profile we find in the cup. Now, about 3 years ago, Boyce, who is the head of the farm and the head of the household, was asked if a specific lot of the French Mission Bourbon could be processed as a sun-dried natural. The main reason being is they're after a more juicy and fruitier cup. Now, this is the result. And it happens to be the third year and the third harvest. It's very exciting times at Chennai Estate right now. Now, what we've been doing so far is we've broken down our 3 different taste balancing components, and we've focused on each one. What I want to do is focus them a little bit more, expand on them, and then bring them together to develop our signature beverage. And I want to start with the sweetness. Remember that bright, juicy nectarine we had in the espresso? We were blown away at how different this coffee tasted when processed another way. And it got us thinking, what if we took this processing method and we applied it to, say, the main fruit we tasted in the espresso, the nectarine? So we did. We got fresh nectarines and we dehydrated them. We then rehydrated them in hot water for 24 hours. Now this gave us a viscous and sweet infusion, matching perfectly to the sweetness we found in the espresso. Second is the acidity. That raspberry acidity that rolled off the back of the sweetness. Now this was quite tricky, but not impossible. We got fresh raspberries, and we wanted to focus on just the acidity in them, not the sweetness. So we incorporated rose petals. We then dehydrated both, and the rose petals sucked out any sweetness, and left us with a nice acidic infusion with cold water. And last but not least, my old friend bitterness. Now again, quite tricky, but not impossible. We got cocoa nib from Madagascar, and we infused it with water for 6 hours. Now, this not only gave us that bitter component in the espresso, but it focuses solely at the end of the drink. There's also that nice dry, but at the same time refreshing linger. Now, the reason why I've pre-prepared these infusions is because just like the sun-dried natural processing method, it takes time to get it right. So I wanted to make sure that the intensity of these match to the espresso perfectly. Now this is where you guys come in, the fun bit. What I'm going to ask you to do is to finish building your own drinks. The main reason being, I really want you guys to come through and experience this last step with me. From what I've felt and experienced, having a hand in the process from seed to cup has been insanely remarkable, and I wouldn't be where I am without it. So I'd like you to start by adding the sweetness, followed by the acidity, followed by the bitterness. Go ahead and get that in now. Fantastic. Now, thank you. We're going to be serving this drink at room temperature. The main reason being is just like we did with the espresso. You'll notice we let it cool down quite a lot. We're going to do the same right here. I'd like you to pick up, swirl for 5 seconds. Now take in the aromas. Have a big sip. And if you could do the same again, that'd be fantastic. So another big swirl, take in the aromas, followed by a big sip. Thank you very much. I'll leave you guys with that.
So he's just got 30 seconds left. He's just going to go and clean his machine, make sure his station's all sorted, it's in good order, because he's going to get judged on that by the technical judges that are standing behind.
Insanely remarkable, he said, about working with this coffee. And
thank you so much for your time today, guys, and thanks for having me. And thank you very much to Boyce and the Harris family. I hope I've done their coffee proud. Time.
all right, name shout out to the farmers at the end there. The crowd's cheering.
For World Barista Championship finalist number 2, Barista Championship, New Zealand!
We see some standing oviations in the crowd. Big moment for the Kiwis as he finishes just in time. Insanely remarkable, I think, is the key word here. He's approaching our desk here, and we can talk a little bit about this coffee.
Hey, but
Oh, he's hugging. My co-host is slippery and hugs all the competitors.
slippery and slimy. Well done, mate. That was awesome.
Thank you.
I've been lucky enough to see it 3 times now, and each time you seem a little bit better. You seem to be a little bit more polished. You had some spare time at the end there to go and pretend to clean your drip tray and stuff. Did it feel smoother? The more you do it, are you getting better at it, or was that just the perfect one?
I think so. It was reasonably smooth. A couple of things, but I'm pretty happy.
So
the espresso was nice and mixed in, which is good.
yeah, tell me about those extractions that you had. The first extraction, the fruit extraction. What was that? I missed the name.
The first extraction.
Yeah, the first of the the preparations that you did. The little vials.
So that
yeah,
was
infusions.
It was a sun-dried nectarine.
Nectarine.
Rehydrated it and taken just the water from that, so the infusion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's to get some of that citrus kind of nectarine characteristic, that stone fruit characteristic.
Yeah. And then by doing a slow infusion, you actually get quite a little bit of body in it as well.
Right, and we were talking during your presentation about the choice to use a natural. That's a bold thing, especially from Kenya, which is a place not known for naturals. Yeah, and so what spoke to you about this coffee? The fruit characteristic, or?
Yeah, it was. I've always had a love for naturals.
Mm-hmm.
And like I mentioned in my routine, as soon as I kind of was introduced to this coffee, I was just like, what?
Doesn't make sense.
And how can we make this work? Can we do it? And we had last year's crop for New Zealand heats, which was awesome, and managed to get the fresh crop. So I was only on the trees 2 months ago.
Oh,
so,
outstanding.
Super juicy.
Yeah, beautiful.
And it is a bit risky, but I mean, when you get it right, it's just singing. So.
Do you need this, by the way?
Yeah, that'd be great, man.
So, while you're opening that, I'm going to ask you a question. How does a country of 4.4 million people keep producing great baristas that consistently keep getting to finals and doing so well? What's so special about New Zealand that produces these amazing baristas?
There's a couple of things. Like one is we're all quite stubborn. I'm not gonna lie. So we don't do well when we're not near the top. But to be honest, we've got an amazing industry and a wicked community. Especially in the last kind of 3-4 years, there's been a lot of focus of people working together, companies working together. we now have a New Zealand Barista Guild and a New Zealand Roasters Guild.
Which you are the chairman of, I believe, the Baristas Guild.
Yeah, so you should join. But yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of different vehicles, I guess, for communication, collaboration, and education. So it's really cool.
It is for sure. I mean, I was lucky enough to be invited by you guys to come down in November and into Wellington, and I was just amazed at how many great coffee shops, how many great roasteries there are. Can it work in such a crowded marketplace? I mean, there are so many different roasteries and so many different coffee shops doing a really good job. Like, does that just raise the quality of what everybody else is doing, or is it a tough market to be in?
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, it definitely keeps you on your toes, which is probably the best benefit from having everybody there. And at the same time, it's like more heads, better ideas, people working together. So, yeah, it's
Yeah, speaking of working together, I was intrigued by during your routine how much interaction between you and the judges there were. My favorite moment was this touching of the texture of the coffee. Where did that idea come from?
So start of last year, I was lucky enough to come across this amazing book from a good friend of mine, Chris Archer, who's a winemaker. And I think I've actually still got it, I just realised. But it was about, I guess, different lots of champagne from France. And when these guys started releasing vintages, it was about a decade ago, they wanted to find a way to introduce the different idea about different micro lots in champagne, different vintages, different years. So they made this amazing book, and it's quite big, quite long, and you open it up, and they had lots of visual cues, and they had three different wines that they kind of spoke about. And one page was all about texture. So for the youngest wine, they had quite a gritty, sprightly textured paper. The middle one was a bit softer, and then the last one, which I think was about 8 years old, was almost kind of like a fabric on clothes. So, and that was the idea, was to touch these and then taste the wine and kind of just to cue your sensory experience and have more appreciation.
That's genius. What did you use for that little circle on the tray?
Well, funnily enough, we got a bunch of different fabrics to match up on the day. And then we turned it over, and the actual just plastic we were using suited it the most. So it's just like a matte finish acrylic.
Yeah, very nice.
But it was perfect, real silky, a nice little bit of grit there. And
I love that. I love that sort of tactile experience of the coffee.
Thank you.
Because that's always one of the most difficult things to explain to people, is that, when you're talking about body and finish and things, you're having to describe them in tactile terms, and people understand that with their fingers, and they may not understand that with their tongues.
So, and even with the flavors, just color cues are usually a good way to introduce.
Yeah.
Orange and then to mandarin or nectarine. And
yeah, and you had this puzzle going. It took some woodcraft in order to do that. Were you involved in that process?
I was involved in the ideas, but not in the building. I've got a really good friend, Jack, who has a company back in Wellington, who made them all.
Round of applause there
Jack.
for...
He's up there somewhere. There he is. But yeah, he's amazing. I kind of just always go to with an idea which is a good idea but doesn't really work, and then he makes it work and 10 times better. So
Yeah, it looked beautiful.
yeah, thank you.
So I noticed when you were up there, it was very much like we were in your shop. It was like, is that good? Is that okay? You were very, very calm and casual. Was that something you thought about that you wanted to get across? Because it seemed to me like it was very much a shop experience, more than trying to be formal and, as a, kind of wooden man there. You were very kind of interactive with the judges.
Thanks. Yeah, so I mean, this is my 5th year in competition, first year at Worlds, and the most common feedback I always got was, be yourself and have fun. So this year I was like, fine. So let's just make it real casual, make it all about the coffee, what we like to do, and that's kind of how we run out and interact with our shops as well. So
I think it's so important to enjoy it up there, because if you're enjoying it, then there's a potential your judges might enjoy it. That might transmit across.
Yeah, so at the end, something that I could tell was also very personal for you was that making the connection with the people that grew the coffee and processed the coffee. You talked about this farm being over 100 years old or something like that. And that means that they must, these may be some original plantings of these French mission varieties, because that was right around the time that they brought that variety to Kenya. So do you, when interacting with these producers, do you feel that continuity of that length of time that they've been in the coffee business?
Absolutely. It was quite amazing, actually. So after the New Zealand ones, we had quite a lengthy conversation over email, and it turns out Boyce, who's the owner, his grandmother is actually from New Zealand.
Oh, far
believe
out.
it or not. So
Yeah.
from a tropical little place down south called Invercargill. And one section of the farm is named after one of the beaches there. So we
Wow.
were just like, what? So
That's an amazing connection to have,
pretty
yeah.
crazy. So it was really cool. And yeah, they were just so into the idea of their coffee being at the World Barista Champs. And I was like, oh, I dig it, man. You guys are doing an amazing job.
And that's the thing, it's great for producers when their coffee is represented on this stage, isn't it? It's, it's passing the value back to the producers.
Yep.
That's great.
Let's talk about this coffee and the cappuccinos. It must have been pronounced fruit characteristics. You talked about orange and
Yep.
and things. But fruity naturals can be challenging in the context of milk. What was your experience with that?
We were quite lucky, actually. The first time we tried it, we were just like, you've got to be joking. This is amazing. And then I guess from there, finding the best ways were mostly to do with roast profiles and agings of roasts.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like it was more often than not very, very delicious. Quite fruit forward at the start, but then moved straight into that, I guess, butterscotch body. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
really
And
cool.
another thing that you mentioned a lot was bitterness. You weren't afraid of bitterness at all. You talked about it a lot. You grabbed onto that thing that can be a controversial word. There must have been a thought process behind that.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been a huge texture fan. I've always felt it's something which is always underrated and never really gets brought up in conversation, especially with coffee or wine. So that's usually my main theme, hence the pad. And then with this coffee, the bitterness was all in that texture at the end. So I was like, oh, this is brilliant. Let's kind of single this out. And
We were both saying on the commentary how brave it was to do, but how right it was because you were so... It wasn't like you were going, it's a little bit bitter and running away from it. You were saying, this has a cocoa, cocoa nib bitterness and it's really delicious.
that's awesome.
So, yeah, and that's fantastic. And it's done you well so far getting to here.
I hope so.
What about while we're on the cappuccino course? We were talking a little bit about milk and how much an advantage that a Kiwi might have with milk because the milk can be so good. Did you bring milk in, or did you use Australian milk?
No, I was absolutely petrified of Australian customs, to be honest.
Yeah,
I was like, bare
I
minimum.
bet. Yeah.
But yeah, we just tried lots of different milks backstage and from different cafes and just asked around like what's good, what works, and got it.
They've got some really good milk here. You got the story that we were saying on the commentary about your wife.
Yeah.
It's, that she's convinced that the coffee's better in Melbourne, and it's like a lot of it's this wonderful, delicious milk as well that's here. So I think all that's left to do is to let you run away and get clean glasses and all the rest of it. And one last huge round of applause for the World Barista Championship finalist number 2, Barista Champion of New Zealand, Nick Clark.